My name is Captain Daniel Reeves, and I am 38 years old. I spent the last 18 months deployed overseas, waking up every morning to the same sand-colored horizon and falling asleep each night wondering if the world I left behind would feel the same when I returned. The job demanded parts of me most people never see. The disciplined parts that learn to stay calm under pressure and carry responsibility like a second skin. Even with all that training, I felt a knot in my stomach as the plane touched down. Because coming home is its own kind of battlefield, I kept telling myself that everything would settle once I walked through my front door. I wanted to believe that the life I built was still waiting for me, steady and familiar. The truth is that long deployments change a man in ways that are hard to explain, and the silence between thoughts gets louder the closer you get to home. I tried to push that feeling away, the sense that too much time had passed and I might not fit back into my own life as easily as I hoped. I told myself to focus on the good, on the simple fact that I survived another rotation and finally had a chance to breathe. Serving in the Army taught me discipline, duty, and the importance of staying present even when the world feels unstable. I carried those lessons with me as I stepped off the plane, feeling the weight of the past year sitting on my shoulders. Under the uniform and the steady stride, there was a man who had seen enough darkness to crave something soft again. I thought home would be that place of softness. I thought my wife would be the anchor that steadied me after months of chaos. As I walked toward the exit, carrying a single worn duffel bag, I tried to hold on to that quiet hope, even though something deep inside me whispered that life had shifted while I was gone, and I was about to learn just how much. I stood alone at the airport, scanning the crowd, expecting to see Melissa waiting with that old nervous smile she used to get whenever I came home. Instead, I found silence, the kind that stings in places you don't expect. I waited for a few minutes longer, trying to convince myself maybe traffic held her up or maybe she was just around the corner. Eventually, I ordered a rideshare and rode home with a lump in my throat that felt heavier than my rucksack. The driver asked how long I'd been away, and I gave the answer I always gave. Long enough to forget how loud America could be. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed the house lights were off even though it was close to dusk. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, expecting warmth, or even just a welcome home. Instead, I heard her voice from the kitchen, calm and distant, asking if I could take my boots off before walking across the hardwood. No hug, no look in the eyes, just that flat, almost bored tone I didn't recognize. She turned to me, leaned on the counter, and asked how it went like I'd just gotten back from the grocery store. I said I was glad to be home, but my words landed like pebbles on concrete. Then she said something that made my stomach clench. We should talk about how we split things now that I'm not bringing in a paycheck. She said it like it was just a fact, something practical to get out of the way. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. She went on, saying things have changed, and with her career on the rise, she needed more balance and fairness in the way we handle bills. It was like she'd been rehearsing it. I stood there in my own house, backpack still slung over one shoulder, realizing this wasn't home anymore. Her face didn't carry any trace of warmth, just a practiced calm that felt colder than the sandstorms I'd just left behind. A small voice inside me whispered that maybe this wasn't the same woman I said goodbye to a year and a half ago. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. I was tired and she was already walking away, back to her phone, her schedule, her life. I sat on the edge of the couch and listened to the silence settle between us like dust. Something was broken, and I was just beginning to see the cracks. The next morning, she placed a folder on the table like it was a menu. I had just poured my coffee, still half asleep, and she was already dressed for work, her heels clicking across the floor like a countdown. She slid the papers toward me and said we should both sign this to make things clearer from now on. I stared at the title across the top. Domestic Financial Agreement. Everything in me went still, like I was back in the barracks right before a mission, waiting for orders I didn't understand. She said it calmly, like it was a logical step, something modern couples do when roles shift. The pages laid out how we'd split everything evenly. Rent, groceries, utilities, even streaming subscriptions. 50-50, across the board, like we were college roommates instead of husband and wife. I looked up at her, hoping to see a trace of softness, maybe even nerves, but her face stayed blank. She sipped her coffee without looking up from her phone, already scrolling through emails or appointments. I wanted to ask if she was serious, if this was some kind of misunderstanding. But I didn't ask. I nodded slowly, because it was easier than starting a fight I didn't know how to finish. I told myself she was stressed, that after 18 months apart, maybe she was just trying to reestablish boundaries. But there was something mechanical in the way she moved. Like she'd practiced this conversation, like she'd been waiting for the right time to make this shift official. Her tone had changed too. Detached, professional. She wasn't the woman who used to leave notes in my boots before a deployment or wait by the window for my texts when I could get a signal. This version of her was composed in a way that didn't feel real. As I signed the last page, I noticed the smallest flicker in her expression. Not relief, not guilt, just something that vanished too quickly. My gut twisted. In the Army, we're trained to watch for microexpressions, for the tension between words and body language. Something about her was off, but I didn't want to admit it yet. I placed the pen down and pushed the folder back across the table. She nodded once, stood up, and said she'd be late coming home because of a client meeting. She didn't kiss me goodbye, just grabbed her bag and walked out like nothing had happened. I sat there alone, staring at the clock on the wall. It ticked loud in the silence, and I realized I didn't know what time it was anymore. I'd stepped off the battlefield thinking the war was over, but something inside me knew I was just entering a different kind of fight, one I hadn't trained for, one where I wasn't sure who the enemy was yet. A few nights after signing the agreement, I started noticing things that didn't sit right. Melissa stayed up late in the living room with her laptop balanced on her knees, the screen tilted away just enough to keep it out of view. Whenever I walked in, she'd close it quickly or angle it like she was just finishing up work. She kept her phone close, face down on the counter or tucked into her pocket, always on silent. I caught her texting once, fingers moving fast, a faint smile on her lips that vanished the moment she saw me watching. She said it was just work stuff, but something about her tone felt too rehearsed. There were nights she didn't come to bed until after I was asleep. I'd hear the soft hum of her voice through the floor, too low to make out words. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, said her schedule was packed and she needed to unwind. One afternoon, I tried logging into our shared laptop to check an old file, only to find the password had changed. She said she'd updated it because of a security concern at work. I told myself that made sense, but it stuck with me. Not because she changed the password, because she hadn't told me. In the field, you learn to read a room before stepping into it. Body language, tone, eye contact. Melissa had shifted. She was keeping things close to the chest, like I was a stranger and she had something to protect. I kept trying to give her space, but every day the house felt less like mine, less like us, and more like I was trespassing in someone else's life. It started with an old email account she'd forgotten to log out of on our shared tablet. I wasn't looking for anything. I was checking the calendar when the inbox popped up. Most of the messages were routine, but one subject line caught my eye. It mentioned a transfer and had a sender I didn't recognize. Curiosity gave way to instinct. I opened the thread and found dozens of messages between Melissa and someone named Ryan, who she had labeled in her phone as a financial advisor. But this didn't read like business. It was casual, playful, even flirty. Inside jokes, teasing replies, mentions of drinks after meetings and how she missed his laugh. The dates lined up with the late nights she said she was working late. With the locked laptop and sudden interest in separate finances, she had been building something behind my back, and now the pieces were falling into place like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. I scrolled through message after message, each one confirming the truth I didn't want to admit. I told myself maybe it was just emotional, that maybe it hadn't gone further than texts and drinks, but deep down, I knew better. There were too many references, too many shared memories that didn't include me. The air in the room felt heavier, like it was pressing against my chest. I set the tablet down and sat in silence. My hands were cold, my jaw clenched. I'd faced danger before, real danger, but nothing ever hit like this. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd replaced me. Quietly. Completely. While I was serving, she was slipping away piece by piece. And now I was finally seeing how far gone she really was. I found the policy by accident, buried in a folder labeled medical renewals. It wasn't something she'd meant for me to see. A thick envelope tucked between dental forms and home insurance updates. The name on the paperwork hit me hard. My name. Not hers. Not both of us. Just me. The policy had been issued during my 7th month overseas. I checked the date again just to be sure. Right around the time she stopped picking up my calls and told me work was getting in the way. The amount was massive, nearly $500,000. And Melissa was listed as the sole beneficiary. No secondary, no backup. Just her. My hands started to sweat. I flipped through the rest of the documents like maybe I was wrong. Like maybe it was just another military coverage I'd forgotten about. But it wasn't. This was private, filed without my signature. There was a line at the bottom that said authorized via power of attorney. I remembered giving that to her before I left. I never thought she'd use it like this. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind went straight to the worst-case scenarios. What had she been preparing for? What if something had happened to me out there? Would she have cried? Or would she have just waited for the check to clear? I leaned back in my chair, trying to quiet the thoughts racing through my head. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something colder, more calculated. This wasn't just about money. This was about control. She'd built a safety net, but not for both of us, just for her. And now I couldn't stop wondering how long she'd been planning her exit or what else she was capable of. I brought everything I had to a forensic accountant named Laura, someone recommended by a retired buddy from base. She didn't blink when I laid out the documents, just nodded, opened her laptop, and started pulling threads. Within the first hour, she found 2 accounts I didn't know existed. They were tucked under different email aliases, registered in Melissa's maiden name. One was used for everyday transfers. The other held quiet investments. Nothing flashy, but enough to raise flags. Small deposits every month, years in the making. Money being moved consistently and quietly. Right under my nose. Laura kept digging. She found shell purchases linked to a consulting firm, a real estate partnership in Oregon, even a car lease sent to a different address. All of it in Melissa's name. But every initial payment had been funded from our joint accounts. From the money I'd earned while deployed. I had been footing the bill for a future I wasn't invited to. It didn't hit like betrayal anymore. It hit like a blueprint. This wasn't an affair of the heart. This was strategy. And I'd been the silent partner in her escape plan for years. My name had been the cover. My deployment, her opportunity. The anger I felt wasn't loud. It was quiet, cold, controlled. I sat there and watched Laura highlight transfer after transfer. I didn't speak. I just took notes. Every cent mattered now, every detail. If she'd played me like this, then I was done playing fair. I wasn't out for revenge. I was out for balance. I'd given everything for that marriage. Now, I was going to take back what was mine. The first thing I did was change every password. Bank accounts, credit cards, even the streaming services. Anything with our names on it now ran through me. I used authentication layers she didn't even know existed. Then I turned to the house. Our smart home system had always been her toy. She loved how everything obeyed her voice. So I rewired it. I changed the admin access, rerouted the permissions, and locked her out of every device. Lights, locks, thermostat. All of it answered to me now. That morning, I sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee as she tried to use the espresso machine. She tapped the panel 3 times. Nothing. Her brows pulled tight as she tried again. I sipped my coffee and looked through the window, calm as ever. Later, she tried to open the garage. The system didn't budge. She stood there, staring at the panel like it had betrayed her. That part made me smile. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. For once, I wasn't the one guessing, waiting, or begging for answers. She stormed in, asking what I had done. I didn't flinch, just told her maybe she'd forgotten the passcode. Her face said everything. She realized the balance had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. I hadn't won yet, but I had drawn a line, and she wasn't ready for it. She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Her heels struck the floor like hammers as she marched into the kitchen, eyes wide and wild. "What the hell did you do, Daniel?" I stayed in my chair, calm, steady. The folder was already on the table, waiting. She reached for it like she was ready to tear it apart, but her hands hesitated. I told her to read. Just read. First came the emails. Her face flushed. Then the transfers. Her mouth tightened. Then the insurance policy. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I watched every flicker of disbelief, every attempt to regroup. She tried to shift blame, said I didn't understand, that I was twisting everything. I didn't raise my voice. I let the papers speak. The more I revealed, the more her composure cracked. She paced. She cried. She screamed, but I didn't move. I didn't blink. I told her I had everything documented, everything backed up, every detail of her deception laid bare. Then came silence. Her whole frame seemed to collapse, like someone had cut the strings. She sank into a chair, staring at the folder like it was a weapon. She knew it was over. I told her I wanted a clean settlement. No games, no negotiations, or I'd make everything public. She didn't argue. She couldn't. The power had shifted, and we both felt it. My lawyer, Grant, didn't waste time with pleasantries. He flipped through the evidence, nodding with every page, his face unreadable until he finally said it was airtight. The hidden accounts, the insurance policy, the paper trail of asset transfers. It was more than enough. He said Melissa had built a house of cards, and I'd brought the wind. We filed immediately. He worked the strategy like a war plan. Show strength early, control the narrative. Don't give her room to retreat. When Melissa's lawyer called back, they sounded nervous. She wanted to settle quietly. Suddenly, she was willing to be reasonable. She said she didn't want it to go public. She didn't want her parents to know, her job, her friends. Now the secrecy that once gave her power worked against her. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said we'd take nothing less than full transparency. Full disclosure. A clean split down the middle and penalties for hiding assets. Every cent she tucked away, she now had to give half of it up. No exceptions. No sympathy. Grant said most people don't get this kind of closure. That I was lucky to have caught it early. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like clarity. It felt like finally standing up after being pushed to the ground too many times. We walked into the settlement hearing like soldiers walking into a briefing. Calm, focused. Melissa barely looked at me. Her posture was stiff, her voice clipped. But I didn't care anymore. I had already moved past the emotion. Now it was just math. When the final paperwork was signed, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt even, not ahead, not behind, just right. And for the first time in years, I felt like the ground under my feet belonged to me again. A few weeks after the settlement, I got a call I didn't expect. It was from Matt, a guy I'd served with overseas, someone I hadn't heard from in years. He said he'd started a security firm, needed someone with my background, and asked if I'd be open to coming on board. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence settle between us, felt the weight of everything I'd just come through. Then I said yes, not because I needed the work, but because it felt like a doorway opening where a wall used to be. The first day I walked into that office, something shifted in me. It wasn't about uniforms or ranks anymore. It was about standing up in a life I had chosen, not one I'd been dragged through. No secrets, no false smiles, just work that made sense and people who meant what they said. Melissa faded from my daily thoughts. Not completely, but enough. Enough that her name didn't come with a sting anymore. I had my house, my peace. And for the first time in a long time, I slept through the night without waking up tense. Freedom, I learned, doesn't always come from winning a battle. Sometimes it comes from walking away, from letting go of something that once defined you, from saying this isn't love and I deserve better. My story didn't end where I thought it would, but I think that's the point. We don't always get to control what breaks, but we get to decide what we build after. And what I have now, it's not flashy, it's not perfect, but it's mine, and that's enough.